Good afternoon, everybody. So, for our keynote today, we have Shirin Laghai. Shirin Laghai is a seasoned educator with a rich history in theatre arts and expressive arts, passionately bridging creative education with holistic student development across diverse cultural landscapes. Her notable roles include serving as an IBDP Theatre Arts Examiner and spearheading arts departments in international schools in China and Armenia. Presently, she is channeling her expertise into developing a transformative early years curriculum in Mumbai, aiming to bridge the educational gaps. Besides her educational journey, Shirin is a multifaceted, creative professional, delving into acting, physical theater, directing, writing, and photography, and creating enriching narrative spaces both on stage and online. Her endeavors reflect a lifelong commitment to leveraging the arts as a catalyst for meaningful learning and empowerment, with a particular focus on exploring questions of identity, belief, and the space we occupy. So please welcome Shirin Laghai.
Good afternoon. I don't think that's okay. It's working now. Great. Hello. So I'd like to start with a question. How many of you have ever started a business? Okay, great. How many of you work in business as it is now? Okay, and how many of you consider yourself a leader in your field? How many of you consider yourself a leader and an artist? But not most people. That's interesting because the OECD does. Now, there are certain identified OECD 21st century skills. I would like to open it to the floor just to see if you have any thoughts as to what they might be, if anyone would like to contribute. Communication, great. Collaboration. Empathy, wonderful. Let's have a look. As you can see, there's a fair list happening there. Now, all of these OECD skills that have been outlined as being absolutes, as necessary to survive, to thrive in the 21st century as leaders, are equally the skills that any artist needs. Now, I want to take you to a tale of two cities, Tokyo and New York. When I lived in Tokyo, I worked in business, in corporate. I was working with some of the most major corporations, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, IBM, Lehman Brothers. Now, that wasn't my fault, Lehman Brothers. I went in to help these top leaders learn how to thrive within this new Western culture. So it was a fair years back, so I'm showing my age as well. We would work on things like quite a number, but you're not getting that information from me. No. Now, we worked on things like communication skills, presentation skills, how to give business cards, how to stand, how to do presentations, how to negotiate effectively. All of these skills, as you saw, most of them outlined in the OECD skills set. Now, a few years later, I'm not being specific again, but a few years later, I was in New York. I was studying at Stella Adler, which is one of the top acting schools in the world. My British husband insists that I say after RADA, but let's leave that aside. Interestingly enough, the same skills I was teaching in these corporations were the same skills they were teaching us. How to make connections, how to move, how to be conscious of one's body, how to connect. These are skills that every artist, every actor needs, and every good leader too. They're the same skills. Now, what it all comes down to in the end is intentionality. What is the intention? And there are really three key questions to ask. What is the intention? Why is it being done? And importantly, does it translate? It doesn't matter if you're reading an email, if you're negotiating a contract, if you are leaders trying to negotiate a peace treaty. All of these hold true. This intentionality. Now, equally, any art student who walks into a studio is taught these same skills of analysis. What is on the paper? What is on the canvas? What style is it? Is it pointillism? Is it surrealism? Why is it being done? What is that intention that they are taking from the art, that they are taking through and they want to hit the audience? These are exactly the same. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's a merger or an acquisition, if you're considering buying a company. It's the same skills that align. Now, I have a 3-year-old daughter. She is an artist. She loves creating and does on a regular basis. She not only pours her heart and soul into it, but she does it with intention. Now, to you and me, these are just squiggly lines. But to her, these are entire worlds. They're families. Now, I believe that's supposed to be me. I can't see it. If you can, great. Anyone who can see it and wants to buy an original piece of work, come to me afterwards. We'll negotiate with intention. But it is about that. It's about telling that story, making that connection. And it doesn't matter if it's a 3-year-old with a piece of art or a 33-year-old negotiating in a boardroom. It comes down to the intention. And ultimately, it comes to creativity. There is no artist who doesn't have that spark of creativity, and there is no great leader who equally doesn't have that spark of creativity. Now, any YouTube video you look at about presenting, when you are learning how to present, any book that you read about presenting will tell you the same thing. It will give you the same piece of advice. Tell a story. It starts with that. Tell a story. Be creative. Open your heart. Show your vulnerability. Hashtag Brené Brown. But it goes to that, to the personality, to the passion, all of which, again, connected to that creativity. And it is creativity in all fields. Now, the creativity is what has led to some of our greatest achievements as well. It's creativity of thinking outside of the box. In 1602, when the Dutch East India Company decided that they're going to start to sell shares in the company, they became the first publicly traded company in the world. And it did lead eventually to the first stock exchange in 1611 being formed in Amsterdam. Now that led to increasing ideas of what money actually is. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, dividends. Now, I'm not the person to talk to about this, but it did change the entire concept of it. It was no longer that I have this much gold and I can buy this much of product. It became a concept, something in the ether. And I suspect now, if we go to any of our country's gold reserves, probably going to be empty or full of computer servers, more likely. Creativity is what led to JFK standing on a stage and saying, "We will get a man on the moon." Now, it wasn't his creativity, admittingly. It was NASA that got the man on the moon. But the concept was there. That is what leads leaders to these breakthroughs. Creativity is not always good, however. creativity can often lead to more negative things. Lines being drawn in the sand, countries being divided or partitioned, people being turned against each other, hate speech, dehumanizing each other. We are seeing the effects of how negative creativity is used in our world today. Now, what we have to fall back on is one of the skills that was mentioned of empathy. Whether you're thinking as a leader about being empathetic to it's our people or about other people, the staff you work for, the students one has. Empathy at the end of it is what takes that creativity forward. Now, taking back to my experiences in Tokyo, I did some work with some amateur actors in theatre. As we all do in the arts, we sometimes work with amateur. Now, interestingly, the best actors weren't necessarily the trained professionals. They weren't the teachers. They were the bankers. They were the analysts. They were the leaders in their own field that had the skills and understood them as being transferable skills that were then able to come forward and pour that into their creativity in theatre and show how they were doing that. And when you are thinking about your child, when you are thinking about the success of your child in business, in the future, that's where I'm going to leave you on. Choose an arts subject. Thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Shirin. Now I will hand over to the audience. Does anybody have any questions to ask Ms. Shirin about her keynote?
I think it's Ken Robinson who said that schools kill creativity. So there seems to be an issue there where creativity is there right at the beginning and it needs to be there right at the end. Where are we getting lost in the middle?
I believe Picasso said that every child is born an artist, and the true task is to ensure that they stay an artist as an adult. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing terribly. Now, I think that all of education really needs to be revamped. When we focus on differentiating for each child, when we focus on what their pathway is, and valuing them equally, whether it's a child who has the aim to go to Oxbridge, a child who is going into business, or a child who is simply just wanting to be happy. The pathways are the pathways, and it's about seeing what is of value for the child in conjunction with their parents and allowing that pathway to evolve and supporting them on their journey. Now, I could go further into, of course, the curriculums aren't always suited to that. I am an advocate of the IB because I've seen that it can differentiate better. However, experiential learning certainly comes into it. I think that giving them freedom to do project-based work over, not valuing over, but included with the academic, more traditional subjects. But things like forest schools, for example, have happened. We know now, it's been 20 years of it, and often, when they're done well, the results aren't any worse, but they are more fulfilling. And part of it is asking ourselves, what do we want for our children, for our students? Do we want them to be robots that are able to regurgitate facts and achieve? Or do we want them to thrive holistically in and as who they are?
There's this inherent resistance to arts, especially theatre, that you'd often see where somebody would say, no, I'm not an actor, or this is not something I can do. So while you're fully aware of its potential to cultivate all these different skills, what would be a good strategy to navigate this resistance? If you could share something from your own experience.
Sure. I just want to ask for clarification. Do you mean among students who are choosing theatre, or are you talking about generally older people, for adults?
Yeah, for adults largely. You spoke about a lot of experience working with leaders.
Sure.
And I can only imagine the resistance that comes with it, saying no. What has that experience been like, and how have you navigated that?
Absolutely. I think that the first step is to remove the labels of this is theatre, this is drama, because none of us are unaware that in every single interaction we have with anyone, there is an element of character, of role playing, whether that's as a parent to a child, a teacher to a student, a daughter to a parent. These are different faces that we have. And if we think of it as a diamond, it's not being fake. It's simply that a diamond is multifaceted, and we turn the diamond, the light shines through in different ways for different contexts, different situations. Now, I don't think that there is a single political leader who is unaware of the power of drama. I have a negative example of Donald Trump, for example, and he certainly knows how to use the power of character, of drama, of theatre. And it can be used for good as well. There are multiple leaders, many Indigenous leaders, for example, when building up that sense of Indigenous pride, go to some of these things. Shirin Laghai, for example, a Nobel Prize-winning former judge in Iran, would use literature and make references in some of her speeches because these are the connections. Pardon me? Oh. So I think it's about understanding that, first of all, we are all actors. Shakespeare, all the world's a stage. But it is true. The cliches are there because they're true. And by harnessing it and seeing the advantage it can give us, then why wouldn't we want an advantage?